Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode.
Hi, everybody. So, as you'll notice, I look different today. Like, my camera angle. And it's really bugging me, but it's because I'm on my iPad. And it really makes absolutely no difference, other than the fact that I like things being the same. So, anyways, that aside, with us today, we have Mia Hanks. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
Doing good, thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit about who Mia is.
So, I'm Mia Hanks, and basically, I'm a survivor of narcissistic abuse. I was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years. And after I got untangled from that marriage and did a bit of healing, I decided to write a memoir about my experiences, which I did. It's called Bridemaid. And I'm just hoping that my story can help raise awareness about narcissism and hopefully help other victims out there find their voices.
I love it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a sec. But like that's where you were in life, right? You were married. Obviously you're out and I'm assuming doing well since you're able to write about your story and everything. So who are you now?
Who am I now? It's interesting. I'm trying to figure it out. For
That's a good
29
answer.
years, I got married when I was very young. I was 21 years old when I got married.
Oh wow, yeah.
And being with a narcissist, they really take your entire identity. My whole life was kind of revolved around my husband, and he had to be the most important person in the room all the time. And narcissists over time will just kind of chip away at your identity. So, really coming out of this marriage, I did not know who I was. I really couldn't identify any goals. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, it's a journey just figuring those things out for sure.
Right. And I think that's such a important thing to share about because and it's this I don't want to say it's the same. That's not the word. But there is this lack of loss of self-identity in different situations. So I am lucky that I've never had the same situation as you. But just earlier today, I was reading on probably Facebook. I read a lot of the posts on there. Anyway, so I was reading one of the groups, and it was parents of kids with disabilities, but now the child is doing well. They're older, and so the parent is going, who the heck am I now if I'm not constantly taking care of this other person? So
That's
it's
right. Yeah.
yeah, so it's not the same situation, but it's that sense of who the heck am I now after having wrapped my life around someone else. As a parent, it's more of a choice than I would say being married to somebody with covert narcissism. But there is that sense that I think people and I like being sure that others don't turn us off just because you go, oh, I don't deal with narcissism and go click. Because a lot of what the guest shares, what Mia will share, is that it can be expanded to other types of situations. No one person's situation is the same, but there's so much important information that we can share about similar types of feelings.
Very true. Yeah. And just like you said about parents with children with a disability, earlier on, you do pour your whole life into that situation. And so it is similar in that when you have time to yourself, you kind of don't know what to do with yourself. I didn't have much time for myself when I was married. I was, like I say, everything revolved around him. And so it really is a strange feeling, when you are able to wake up in the morning and decide and think, I can decide what I want to do with myself today. I can make my own plans, I can make my own decisions, not based on what's going to trigger someone else or, walking on eggshells around someone else. So it's a bit overwhelming, but it's also very exciting.
Right? Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking about how freeing it can be. Oh, I can make my own decisions, but at the same time you go, but what is it that I like to do?
Yeah,
Right? There
right.
is a whole sense of you need to figure that out. It's almost like starting as a child again, figuring out, do I like peas or do I like corn? Right?
It
Obvious.
really is. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of with a narcissist, you're sort of told who you are, who you're supposed to be, what you like, what you don't like. And you find that you don't make a lot of decisions based on what you want. Everything is taking someone else into account. So yeah, I mean, just very simple things like, what do I like? What are my goals? What do I want to accomplish? And those are questions I did not have an answer to coming out of this marriage.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. As you said that you were married at 21. So and this is something that I think I know other guests on the show have talked about. It's that love bombing at the beginning, and you don't realize that this person is pretty much gonna upend your entire life and take over. So how did it all kind of start? Like why were you like, yes, this is the perfect thing to do and I want to be married, and I'm sure it was awesome feeling at the time. And I want our listeners and our viewers to understand that it's okay when you look back and go, yes, that is how I was feeling at the time. I didn't know, because you're not going to know. Absolutely not going to know. And it's okay if later you need to ask for help to get out. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
The words are hard.
Yeah, the love bombing is a real thing. I mean, that's what pretty much all narcissists will use, that tactic to kind of reel in their victim. Narcissists look for specific personality traits in a person. And yeah, love bombing. I was 21. Back 30 years ago, no one was talking about narcissism. I had
Yeah.
never heard of narcissistic personality disorder. So, it was just the not knowing. And the love bombing, I mean, it looked great, right? It was all this attention and over the top, attention and gifts and just everything that looked fantastic, right? He was so in love with me. And you think, well, how can that be a bad thing?
Exactly.
And it does seem too good to be true. It is too good to be true. But at 21 and very naive, I couldn't see that side of it. And then really once you get into it, narcissism with narcissistic abuse, it does not start bad on day one.
No.
These people are smart. And so it takes some time for them to, it's just a snowball effect. Narcissism, it does not get better. Studies show it gets worse with age. So with each passing year, there's more control, there's more manipulation, there's more gaslighting. And really, before you realize there's a problem, you are pretty deep into this. And really with no sight of how to even begin to unwind and get out of it. So it's a slippery slope.
It really is. And I think the term narcissism has gotten lost, like what it truly is has gotten lost with just people going, you're so narcissistic because you just look at yourself in the mirror all the time. You just care about yourself all the time. It's a lot more than, hey, I look really pretty, so I'm going to look at myself in the mirror.
It
Right?
is, yeah. And it's very annoying, I think, for people who have survived narcissistic abuse to hear that word used so flippantly all the time. Just because someone is really confident or just because they're arrogant, that doesn't mean they're a narcissist. A narcissist, a true narcissist with NPD, this is a personality disorder.
Yeah.
It's not just some personality traits. It is an actual disorder. And it's much more sinister than somebody just being overly confident. So definitely it's overused, and I would say 99% of the time when someone's accused of being a narcissist, they are absolutely not a narcissist. It's not that prevalent, at least we don't think it is. I've read statistics that say 2% of the population. I do believe it's higher than that, because that's just the 2% that were willing to get diagnosed.
Exactly.
The nature of their being is there's nothing wrong with them, so why should they ever be evaluated for a condition? So I do think it's higher than 2%, but certainly not what you hear out in society.
Exactly. So, you're young and happy and excited to get married. What are some warning signs that, or like, how did it start shifting? Um, for those listeners that maybe they might see some of these signs, and I think it's really important to show that like we said, it is an actual personality disorder. So, what are some things that might happen?
The first sign I saw, and at the time, 21 years old, I just wrote it off as a personality quirk, but it was not. Um, and that was the lack of empathy.
Mm.
Narcissists don't, oftentimes, they don't have empathy. They can't self reflect. They can't put themselves in someone else's shoes or see things from other people's perspectives. That lack of empathy really showed when, for example, if I was sick, um, it wasn't, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling bad. How can I help you? My husband's reaction to me being sick would be to be angry at me. And
Oh,
I thought, how odd. Who gets mad at someone because they're sick? But he did. It was a disruption to his day. It didn't fit his agenda and it didn't serve him. And therefore, his response was to be angry. Again, I wrote that off as a personality quirk and thought, well, that's kind of strange, but it's no reason to up and leave a marriage, right? And so I hung in there, but that lack of empathy really grew and grew, and over time, I just noticed the control, the controlling my time. I just felt like after a period of time, I just didn't have a life. I didn't have my own life. And it was that feeling of slowly being suffocated, you know. Those are things that I did not pay attention to enough early on. And those things grew bigger and bigger and bigger.
and that's a really common thread with the other guests that have talked about this topic, is that over time, and you don't necessarily notice it because it is a slow progression. Over time, you stop talking to your friends. You only talk to their friends. You
Yes.
stop talking to your family because it's intruding on their time. So these little things that you don't even notice until you go, wow, I haven't talked to my best friend in a year. What the heck?
Yeah, they see that narcissists will see any kind of support system that you might try to build, that is a threat to them. For one thing, they want 100% of your time, 100%, 100% of your attention. Um, but secondly, they also don't want other people out there trying to clue you in and say, hey, this doesn't seem healthy. They don't want that. So isolation is huge for them, and I can agree with that. I didn't have a lot of friends, and really even jointly, mutually, we didn't have a lot of friends, and I think that was by design. I at the time I thought, it seems strange because other people seem to have a lot of friends and we don't. What is it about us? But I just wasn't putting two and two together that really that was what he wanted. It was by design. It was isolation. And if we did have friends, it was just mutual friends, right? Where he was part of that mix. He really did not like me. I spent a lot of time with my parents. He always saw that as a threat. They might try to clue me in, or that to him, that just it didn't set well.
Yeah. So when did you start to clue in?
I'm not sure. I knew several years in that I was pretty miserable. But by that point, I had two kids and I just had to put it out of my mind. So I really don't know when I started to clue in because I tried to ignore it.
I
I
think,
tried to tell myself, this is normal. Your life is normal. This is how everyone lives. And it was really just a survival mechanism. It was
yeah.
just get to the next day and then the next day. So I don't know, but the point at which I decided I absolutely had to get out was when it was affecting my physical health, the stress. I was
Okay.
suffering from chronic pain, headaches, stomach aches, and I just saw that life was not sustainable at that level of stress anymore.
Yeah. I think again, it sounds like you subconsciously knew that something was wrong, but again, you were in survival, you have two kids, you said it, you have to get to the next day. And that's what can be so very difficult for people in these situations or any abusive situation is how do you just up and leave when you do have kids? It makes it a lot more difficult because it's not just you have to worry about. Um, and I remember, now this is a TV show, but it's a moment that stuck out in my mind. So I was watching SVU, love that show.
Mm-hmm.
And the wife ended up killing the husband because he was a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't even realize it until the detectives are like, you did it in self-defense. She didn't even clue in because she was still worried that he was going to be upset that she had to finish cleaning up the blood, not even cluing in that he was dead. And the reason I bring this up is because of the kids in the situation. They were teenagers in the episode, and they kept saying, no, my mom never wanted to go to my basketball game. My dad came. He told me that she didn't want to come. That's why she wasn't there, but he was there. My dad always did this. My dad said my mom was stupid. That's why she couldn't do things, right? So again, it's not as cut and dry as we would hope things would be, where it's like this person's good, this person's bad, and the kids will just know. There is these little things that can prevent it from you being able to get out of these situations.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why victims end up staying in these narcissistic marriages for a lot of times decades. And you know, the kids, I would say the kids were a factor for me, of course. You know, I was in this mindset of I need to keep my family together. You know, I don't want my kids to be children of divorce. And looking back, hindsight is 2020. That was the wrong decision. You know, society tells us you stay in a marriage, you keep that family unit together. And so I had good intentions. That's what I was trying to, I thought I was doing the right thing. But looking back, it was really the wrong thing because my kids only witnessed dysfunction.
Mhm.
Um, they were very aware growing up that their dad was a little off. And so I never had the issue of, you know, them quote unquote siding with him over me. That really was not ever a problem. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to keep that family unit together. And I did wait until my kids were both grown before I left. And, you know, if I had it to live over again, I wouldn't have made that decision. I would have left years prior. But like I say, hindsight is 2020, and we just kind of pick up and do the best we can. But there are so many reasons why victims sometimes never leave.
Right, exactly. Especially, I feel like, because we're talking, you said 29 years you were married, right?
Yes.
So we're talking early-ish 90s, kind of, early-ish 2000. Holy crap. Within the 90s-ish. I don't know how
Yeah.
long you've already been divorced for, but we're
Yeah.
talking pre-internet, guys. Okay,
It
this
it
is
really
important.
was. I mean, and the internet was just kind of becoming a thing. Like I got married in 1994,
Yeah.
you know, and so there was no high-speed internet. You know, I can remember getting high-speed internet hooked up. Yeah, and so I think our access to information, you know, we had to rely on books and
Exactly.
it just wasn't at our fingertips. So there's just so many mental health things that weren't being talked about, you know. And when I grew up, I always, you know, I grew up in a very kind of in a bubble, a very idyllic childhood. I really thought that everybody was good. You know, I
Yep.
had never really met a bad person in my life. Um, and so I had this very skewed vision of what the world was, and not having that info at my fingertips, I just assumed, you know, everybody's good, everybody has good intentions, and
Exactly.
surely this person that I married couldn't be a bad person. You know, he couldn't be manipulated. That's just not who I would have married. So you
Exactly.
really fool yourself. And like I say, when the information is not there, we just think domestic abuse, that's physical, and
Yes.
we don't think about mental, we don't think about psychological. But yeah, I'm living proof that it is real, and we need to start paying more attention.
Yeah. And and that's why I think it's so important when you say, some people stay in it for decades, some people never get out. Because if they got married, I'm gonna say pre-2000, there was this mindset of you always make it work, you always stay with it.
Yes.
And you couldn't get the information, and the information about what this mental illness is, or even what the information of how do I go about getting out of this situation. It wasn't right there. You would have to find a phone book and know what the heck you're looking for.
Right.
Right. And so it made it very difficult. Plus, people didn't start talking about these things, I'm going to say, until about the last 10 years. And that's being gracious.
I would say, yeah, I would say 7 to 10 years, really.
Yeah.
It just wasn't being talked about. And I didn't know what narcissistic personality disorder was until maybe 3 years ago. So I didn't know there was such a thing. But wow, when I found that, it was like my whole life suddenly made sense. It was such an eye-opening, like every box checked. And it was validating. I think if we don't have a name for these things, we just think, well, it must be me.
Right.
And surely nobody else out there is living like this. I must be the only person going through this. But it's important to know that this is pretty. It's more prevalent than it should be. There are a lot of people out there stuck in these types of marriages, and quite honestly, don't know who to reach out to and don't know how to get out.
Exactly. So I'm glad that people like yourself are starting to talk about it. But it is one of the lower talked about things. So, because I've done close to 250 episodes, and I would say if I was to pull up my playlist of narcissist talking guests, maybe 10 episodes, right? Out of 250. You bring up the one about depression, oh, I'm sure there's probably at least 50 or 75, right?
Of course.
It's talked about. So it's nice that people are starting to, but it still has a long way to go in regards to getting enough information out there for people to really, truly know, and getting it to the people who need to hear it. Because if you are in that situation, you are being watched, right? Your spouse is watching you and
You are.
deciding whether or not you should get this information.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, I think if you're in this situation, I mean, this is at least how it was for me. You kind of don't want to hear this stuff. You're at a point where you're in that survival mode and you're trying to make it to the next day. And, my parents would try to tell me over the years many times, this is not great. Like, let's look at this. And every single time I would defend my husband and say, he has a stressful job. He's not normally like this. I would make excuse after excuse. And it's that, they call it trauma bonding. What it really is Stockholm syndrome.
Yes.
It's the same thing. So, you have these victims out there that really are living in this Stockholm syndrome mindset. It's sometimes hard to get through to these people. And it's so sad because you really can't convince someone who doesn't want to take that on. I mean, a lot of people, I think, well, it's safer for me to just go with the flow and play along with this narcissistic agenda. And at least it's familiar, and that's where I was. It's familiar. This is what I do. I know how to do this. I know how to play this role.
The devil you know versus the devil you don't.
That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, I mean, it becomes your normal. And it's scary to, even as miserable as you might be, to take a step away from what's normal is terrifying. So, yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah. And something that I don't know for certain, and you can let me know if I'm barking up the wrong tree or not. But I think there might be a sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? Failure. Right? As somebody trying to hear this information, because I'm thinking about my mom when she was married to an alcoholic. So different because he wasn't a narcissist, but I feel like this might be a similar kind of situation. And again, every situation's different, but we can pick out these similarities. So her hearing that he was, taking up all of her time, that she basically needed to babysit him because if she wasn't home, he would drink more. And if he drank more, then he would get more aggressive, right? So that sense of, I don't know, sense of duty to be there to watch him, like
Yeah.
he needed it. But when it came to her finally leaving him, there was, and my mom and I have talked about these kinds of things, there was that sense of failure. Her marriage was a failure. She failed, right? And that is
Yeah.
not the case at all. I want to be clear. But I think that's something that gets internalized for the person who needs to leave is I'm a failure now because my marriage didn't work.
That's very, very true. And even kind of expounding on that, um, for me, there definitely was a sense of failure, but more than that, it was a sense of embarrassment, because I suddenly had to tell people. I mean, I think we don't like to reach out for help. We
No.
don't want to have to admit that we don't have it all together. And so for me to have to go and admit that, yeah, for 29 years, I have really accepted this kind of behavior. That's embarrassing. People are going to ask questions. Why in the world, did you do that? And that's just the people that believe you, right? But
Yes.
there is a very big issue, at least for me, with the embarrassment factor. And I think a lot of people feel that same way. It's really, it's embarrassing to say that your marriage failed. It's embarrassing to say that you accepted that level of treatment. And it's embarrassing to say that you need help.
Yes.
So sometimes it's just easier, at least we think, in our kind of skewed mindset, it's easier to just stay where we are, not deal with the embarrassment, not create this huge dramatic event, and just don't rock the boat. And that's what
Yeah.
I did for a lot of years.
Yeah. That's another really good point. I didn't consider that part of it. Um, so when you finally made the decision to leave, what kind of led up to it? I know that you said that you were starting to experience some physical issues, but what was sort of leading up to it? Because I know it can be um, difficult to leave. So I know for my mom, when she left an abusive situation, she waited till he was at work and she got the fuck out of there
Yeah.
because of the situation, and that's how that needed to go. So what sort of led up to it?
So yeah, I was having the physical symptoms. And we had just taken our first child to college. And
Wow.
so, and then my other one was getting ready to graduate. And so, it seemed the timing was things kind of were falling into place. His
Mhm.
control over me was getting to a level that it became frightening. It was
Oh,
always frightening. I just didn't want to admit it, but it was getting even more so, to the point that, I had moments where I was very scared. And it just felt like you know, my kids weren't minors anymore, and I wouldn't have to deal with custody and all of this. Literally, my physical body is breaking down, and all the stars kind of aligned, and I decided I gotta go.
yeah.
I didn't make a break in the night. To me, that felt too unsafe. I was very scared about leaving.
Yeah.
With narcissists, you are not dealing with a neurotypical person. And so you don't know what their reaction is going to be. So what I did was I left slowly.
Okay.
Probably not what the experts would tell you to do, but I just started finding more and more reasons to stay at my parents' house.
Okay.
And, oh, I need to spend the night over here because such and such. And, one thing led to another. And then finally it was, well, I think I'm going to stay over here a little while because, I'm just not doing well. I just need a mental health break. Let me, I just need to figure some things out. And that's kind of how it went. And it was just a slow progression of, and he's getting a little, rather than him getting just all out, you know, having a total meltdown tantrum. It was
Mhm.
sort of a build up. So, I mean, yeah, I had to deal with his outbursts and all of this, but it was it was a little bit of a slower progression. So that worked for me. A lot of people will say, leave, get out, go no contact, block them on everything.
Yeah.
And for some people, certainly that's, that's the answer. But for me, I was too scared to do that. It felt a little too abrupt.
Yeah. And I think it's important to know that there isn't one right way to do it. You have to do what's going to work for you. If your safety is an issue, then yeah, it might be that you have to just leave with that no contact, because if there's any contact, maybe you wind up being severely hurt.
Yeah.
But if you can't do that, if it needs to be a progression, like you said, whatever is going to be the safest and most comfortable for the person leaving, I think is the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think safety is the number one goal in all of it. And so whatever you have to do to be safe, whether that is, abruptly leaving or leaving over a period of time, whatever is going to be the safest for you is the right answer.
Exactly. So when he finally figured out that you were not coming back, was there any repercussions? How did you keep yourself safe?
Yeah, I mean, he did all sorts of crazy things. He, for one thing, he set up meetings with my parents to talk, and narcissists will do this. They will reach out to everybody
Yep.
basically to tell them everything that was wrong with me and that why I needed to come back to him. That didn't work, obviously. His next, his next tactic was the financial abuse, which really had been going on my whole marriage. I just didn't realize it. But he basically drained the bank account so that I couldn't access money to buy food. And that's a huge thing that's not talked about much. It's a reason that a lot of women especially end up staying in these relationships.
Yeah.
And it's a way that the narcissist can a lot of times get their victim to come back. You choke them out with, you can't have any access to money until you come back to me.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had my parents to help me out. But, there is that interim where you leave, but you haven't filed for divorce yet.
Yeah.
And so there are no parameters in place, court ordered parameters. So, for example, my ex-husband basically drained the bank account and made sure he kept as little in there as possible. So he had other accounts that I didn't have access to. I never thought that was an issue during marriage. I had my little debit card and I had the checking account that I could access. I had everything I wanted. Everything was great from a money standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize till after I left that, that's the only account I have access to. And, and that's a joint account. And all he has to do is transfer that money into one of his other accounts that I have no access to. And there you go. I have no money. So, it's and that's not unusual for a narcissist. They do use money as a means of control. So that was a big thing that he did. And I think he really thought, that was going to result in me coming back. And it did not, obviously.
And that's something that I've heard is common, is that they do things in a way to force you back.
Yes.
Right? It's not that they're going to make your life awful, but they want to make it awful in a way that pushes you back to them, is the goal.
That's right. And, I don't know what the statistics are, but I would venture a guess that if you return to a narcissist, the chances of getting out a second time are slim to none. I do know the national statistic is with an abusive relationship in general, it takes a woman 7 tries to leave. I think that's totally not the case with a narcissist. If you leave once and you come back once, you're probably not getting out again, because you see, you've let them win. They've won.
Yeah.
And things will be great for a few weeks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then they're going to up. Oh yeah. And then the whole cycle begins again. And then they're going to up their game. Now they're angry because you discarded them. Yeah. So you've got to deal with the repercussions of that. So I think they put things in place to ensure that you don't get out again.
Yeah.
So that really is disheartening to think that, how easy it is to go back to them. They guilt you, the financial abuse, all these things.
The promises of change, I've heard,
Oh,
is a big
yes.
one. I won't do that
Yeah,
again.
of
Yeah.
course. No, never. But yeah, once they have you back, they have you.
Okay. So, um, once you finally were able to cut ties, and he knew that you were not going back, how did you start to rebuild?
Well, the first thing I did was I sought out a therapist who had some expertise in narcissism, and that is important
Yes.
because not all therapists have a lot of knowledge in that field.
Mhm.
So I found somebody who did, and that was helpful. Therapy is not a cure-all. It's not a miracle, but what it will do is it will lay the groundwork for you to learn how to continue to heal. So I think that was really an important step. The other thing is building that support system. I basically had 3 people I talked to, and you don't need a whole team of people. You just need a few, and just daily accountability and somebody checking in on me every day. That was huge. And just being able to really talk through some of this stuff that I have kind of kept hidden for so many years was very therapeutic.
Yeah, I love all of that. And when you said finding a therapist that understands it, I think sometimes people go, well, just go to therapy. And I say it all the time, but when it comes down to it, it's finding the right therapist, which I've said on the show. It's finding the therapist that makes sense for you. And it might not be the first one you talk to, and you might have to do a little bit of research because there are so many different mental illnesses out there, crises that you have to deal with out there, that no one therapist can do it all. Just like a family doctor, they do a general kind of thing and then we'll refer you to the specialist.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, it's the same thing when it comes to our mental health. There's going to be people that specialize in PTSD, that specialize in narcissism, that specialize in depression, whatever it is. You have to do your own research and find the one that works for you, because I think therapy is one of the best things. But finding the right one is the most important part of that
Definitely.
process.
Yeah, definitely. That was huge for me. Because if your therapist doesn't understand narcissism, it is such a tangled web. There are so many layers to this type of abuse, that if your therapist doesn't understand narcissistic personality disorder, I mean, this is crazy stuff. And I like to say people who haven't lived it, they just can't believe it's real. It's nuts. And so really, there's websites you can go to where you can find a therapist, and it will tell you kind of what their specialties are. And that's what I would recommend is find someone who has listed narcissism as one of their key areas that they focus on.
Definitely. Yeah. Um, so as you've rebuilt and put out your book, how are things going now? How's the kids? Like, are they, because I can only assume, and luckily they were grown. Um, but it must have been tough, even though they maybe knew something. I still assume it would be tough. So are things kind of good with them? Did it graduate?
Yes, they're doing great. They're really great. And they have a good relationship with their dad as much as they can.
Mhm.
I suppose they know that he's a narcissist, and they're fully aware. But even so, I mean, he's their father, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to discourage them from having a relationship with him. Um, but it's still kind of hard. I will admit it's still kind of hard. But I think they're old enough to be aware of who he is, and so that's good. So they're great. They really are. I think
Oh,
I have a
good.
better relationship with my kids now that I'm out of that marriage.
Hmm.
I'm just more free to be there for them, and that feels great. Yeah, and I'm basically just promoting my book right now, and not really sure what comes next. I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think that's pretty common theme for everyone in life.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
So before we hear a little bit more about your book, what is a piece of wisdom that you would give to somebody who, and I'm going to reverse the role here. What would you tell somebody who, as a friend, they're looking at their friend going, "Oh my goodness, you're in a relationship with a narcissist, but what should the friend maybe, do you have any wisdom for the friend?"
Yeah, that's a really tough situation because, like I say,
Yeah.
it's really hard to convince someone if they are not ready to hear it. I think the only thing you can do is just let that person know that they can come talk to you when they're ready. I mean, we really can't force someone to leave. You can't say you need to get out now. It's just not going to go over well. So realize that they are probably trauma bonded, and leaving is not easy. It's not just, oh, I think I'm going to just up and leave. It doesn't work that way. So I would say just to have patience and be that person that they can come and talk to when they're ready.
Amazing. So your book, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So basically, when I was going through this and really wanting to learn everything I could about narcissism, all the books I found were written by either a therapist or a psychologist. And, great information, but very academic. And I really wanted to find, I was wanting an insider point of view. I wanted to hear about somebody else who had been through what I had been through, and I
Yeah.
just couldn't find it. So I thought, maybe a memoir would be helpful to somebody else out there who was seeking that
Yeah.
information as well. A therapist, psychologist, they can tell you a lot about it, but what I try to provide in my book is what it's like day to day living with a narcissist, what the mundane looks like and
Yes.
the progression of how it progresses. My book starts when I first meet my husband all the way through our divorce. And I just want to show day to day life and how it progresses and how I change throughout the course and finally, up to leaving and then through our very tumultuous divorce. So I hope that I hope it lands in the right hands of people who, can benefit from it and need to read it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because the worst thing is feeling alone.
Yes.
And the other thing is that we talked about, they need to be able to access this information somewhere, somehow, but they might not be ready to admit it. So
Yeah.
by having a book that they can pick up and go, "Wow, okay, so this has happened to someone else. Maybe there's something more to this. Maybe this
Yeah,
isn't
I
normal."
that's interesting because I hadn't really thought about this until you said that. But if I had found this book midway through my marriage and read it, I might have left. I might not have stayed as long. It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe, like you said, it can help somebody else. So that is
I hope
definitely
so.
the goal.
Yes.
And where do people pick it up?
Anywhere online that books are sold, Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. I also have a website, miajhanks.com, and there's a link on my website that will take you to Amazon where you can purchase. And it's available in ebook and paperback.
Amazing. And do you have social media? People can follow you, see what you're up to doing next.
Yeah, my main social media that I use is TikTok, and my handle is at NPD and me. And then I'm also on Instagram. It's at npd.andme.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing.
Thank you for having me.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.